Katerina pressed her palm against the outer wall, feeling the cold bite through the wood into her skin. Behind her, Silas Mercer's laughter cut through the morning air like a blade. "2 walls," he said, shaking his head. "Woman's lost her mind. Wastes half her summer building a second wall around a perfectly good cabin. And for what? So the wind has 2 things to blow through instead of 1? The other men joined in, their voices carrying across the frozen ground. Katerina didn't turn around. Her fingers traced the gap between the 2 layers, the space they couldn't see, the space they didn't understand. Let them laugh. Winter would be the judge. Before we continue with Katerina's story, I want to ask you something. Have you ever been doubted when you knew you were right? Have you ever pushed forward with an idea that everyone told you was foolish? If this story resonates with you, please subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. And I'd love to know, where are you watching from today? Drop your city in the comments below. Your location helps us understand how far these stories of courage and perseverance travel across the world. The problem started the first week they arrived. Katerina had known cold before, the kind that settled into your bones in the Carpathian foothills, the kind that made your breath hang in the air like ghosts. But Wyoming's cold was different. It didn't just settle. It hunted. "The stove's been burning all night," Istvan said, rubbing his hands together as he stood in the center of their cabin. "I fed it twice. How is it still this cold?" Katerina watched him from where she sat on the edge of their bed, Alona curled against her side, still sleeping. The child's breath came out in small white puffs. Inside their home. That shouldn't happen. "The heat's leaving," Katerina said quietly. "Well, of course it's leaving. It's winter. That's what heat does." "No." She stood up, careful not to wake Alona, and walked to the wall. She placed both palms flat against the wood. Cold. So cold it almost burned. "It's not just leaving naturally. Something's pulling it out. The wind." Istvan frowned. "The wind's outside. That's what walls are for." "These walls aren't working." She pressed harder, feeling the slight give in the wood, the microscopic spaces between the planks. "The wind doesn't just blow past. It pulls. It sucks the warmth right through the wood, takes it away before we can keep it." Her husband moved beside her, touching the wall himself. His frown deepened. "Everyone else's cabins are built the same way. And everyone else is burning through their woodpiles twice as fast as they thought they would." Katerina moved to the window, looking out at their neighbors' cabins. Smoke rose from every chimney, thick and constant. "You've seen it. Talk to them. They're all struggling." "So what are you saying? We need a thicker wall?" "Not thicker," she turned back to him. "Double." Istvan stared at her. "Double?" "2 walls, one inside, one outside, with space between them." "That's—" He stopped himself, clearly trying to find the kind way to say it. "That's a lot of work, Katerina, and a lot of lumber. We just got here. We barely have enough saved to survive the winter? That's exactly my point." She felt the urgency rising in her chest, that familiar feeling when she saw a solution so clearly but couldn't make anyone else see it. "If we keep burning wood like this, we'll run out before spring. And then what? We can't chop enough to keep up. The cold will win." He was quiet for a long moment, his eyes moving from her face to the wall and back again. "Where did you get this idea?" "My grandfather's barn, in the mountains. He built it with double walls to protect the animals. The inner wall kept the heat from their bodies inside. The outer wall took the wind. The space between, that's what mattered. The air trapped there became its own shield. A barn is different from a house. Cold is cold, Istvan. Heat is heat. The principle doesn't change." He rubbed his face with both hands. "The neighbors will think we're crazy. The neighbors are burning through their winter stores in November. Let them think what they want. That was how it started, with a conversation in the early morning cold, with the truth sitting between them, like something too obvious to ignore, but too strange to accept easily. By late spring, when the ground had thawed enough to work, and the worst of the winter had finally released its grip, Katerina began. She started with measurements, walking around the cabin with string and wooden stakes, marking out where the second wall would go. The neighbor women watched from their gardens. "What's she doing?" Martha Henderson called across the fence. "Planning," Katerina answered simply. "Planning what?" "A second wall." Martha's face went through several expressions: confusion, curiosity, and finally, something close to pity. "Your cabin has a wall already, dear." "I know." "Then why?" "Because one isn't enough." Katerina hammered another stake into the ground. "The heat escapes too fast. A second wall will trap it." "That's—" Martha looked toward her own husband, who was repairing their fence several yards away. "Jonas, come hear this." Within minutes, half a dozen people had gathered at the property line. Katerina kept working, kept measuring, even as the whispers grew louder. "She's building a second wall," someone said. "Around the whole cabin?" "That's what it looks like." "But why?" "Something about keeping heat in." "Our walls keep heat in just fine." "Maybe they didn't build theirs right." Katerina's hands tightened on the string, but she didn't look up. Let them speculate. Let them judge. She had work to do. Istvan came home that evening to find her covered in dust, her hands marked with small cuts from handling rough lumber. "People are talking," he said carefully. "People always talk. They're saying you're building something unusual." "It is unusual. That's the point." She washed her hands in the basin, watching the water turn gray. "If the usual way worked, we wouldn't be freezing in our own home." "Some of them are calling it wasteful, saying we're using lumber we don't have to spare." "We don't have wood to spare for burning either, but that's what we'll do all winter if we don't fix this now." She dried her hands on her apron, turning to face him. "I'm not stopping, Istvan. I can't." He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I know. I'll help you." "You will?" "You're my wife. If you're determined to build a second wall around our home, then we're building a second wall around our home." He managed a small smile, "even if it makes us the talk of the territory." The work consumed their summer. Katerina and Istvan rose before dawn, worked through the heat of the day, and continued until darkness made it impossible to see clearly. The second wall rose slowly, plank by plank, creating a strange double outline around their cabin. The gap between the walls measured exactly 18 inches, wide enough to trap air, but narrow enough that the heat couldn't spread too thin. Silas Mercer stopped by in mid-July, ostensibly to borrow tools, but really to inspect what they were doing. "That's quite a project," he said, walking around the growing structure. "Must be costing you." "It's an investment," Katerina replied, wiping sweat from her forehead. "In what? Making your cabin look like it swallowed another cabin?" He laughed at his own joke. "Seriously, Katerina, what's this supposed to accomplish?" "It's going to keep the heat inside this winter." "Heat rises anyway. That's just nature." "You can't fight nature." "I'm not fighting it. I'm working with it." She set down her hammer, meeting his eyes directly. "The air between these two walls will trap the warmth. The outer wall takes the wind. The inner wall holds steady. The space between them becomes insulation." Silas tilted his head, genuinely trying to understand. "But everyone's cabins already have walls. They work fine." "Do they? How much wood did you burn last winter?" "I don't know. A lot. It was a hard winter. It'll be a hard winter this year, too. And the year after that. This is Wyoming, not Virginia. She picked up her hammer again. You can keep burning through your forest and hoping each winter is milder than the last. Or you can build smarter. This isn't smarter. It's just more. He shook his head. You're doubling your work for what? A theory? For survival. He left, shaking his head. And that night, around fires and dinner tables across the valley, the story of Katerina's double wall became entertainment. The eccentric woman from the Carpathians who thought she knew better than generations of American builders. The immigrant who was wasting her summer on a structure that made no practical sense. She's making her husband help her with it, someone said. Poor man, probably just keeping the peace. Mark my words, come first snow, they'll realize it was all for nothing. Maybe even have to tear it down because it blocks the sun or some such problem. But Katerina didn't hear these conversations. She was too busy working, too focused on the vision in her mind. The vision of her family, warm and safe. Of their woodpile lasting through the winter. Of proving that intelligence could triumph over convention. Ilona, now old enough to understand some of what was happening, asked questions while helping stack smaller pieces of wood. Mama, why don't the neighbors build walls like this? Because they haven't thought of it yet. But you told them about it. Mrs. Henderson knows. Mr. Mercer knows. Everyone knows now. Knowing about something and believing in it are different things, sweetheart. Katerina paused in her work, looking at her daughter. People don't like new ideas. New ideas are scary. They threaten what people think they already know. But if your idea works, they'll have to believe it. Maybe. Or maybe they'll find reasons why it doesn't count, why their situation is different, why they don't need to change. She resumed working. That's why we're not building this for them. We're building it for us. By late August, the second wall was nearly complete. The cabin looked strange now. Bulkier than its neighbors, enclosed in what appeared to be a wooden cage. Some people had stopped commenting directly, though Katerina could feel their eyes on her whenever she came to town for supplies. How's the project going? The general store clerk asked, in that careful tone people use when they think you're making a mistake, but they're too polite to say it outright. Almost finished, Katerina said, counting out coins for nails. Must feel good to have all that work nearly done. It will feel good when winter comes and we're warm. The clerk nodded, but his expression said he thought she was delusional. September arrived with the first hint of frost in the early mornings. Katerina sealed the final gaps in the outer wall, checked every joint, made sure the spacing remained consistent all the way around. The structure was solid. Now all that remained was to wait for the test. Istvan stood back, surveying their work. It does look strange, he admitted. It looks different, Katerina corrected. Strange is just what we call things before we understand them. And if it doesn't work, it will work. But if it doesn't, then we'll have spent a summer building something that didn't solve our problem, and we'll spend the winter cold like everyone else. She met his eyes. But it will work, Istvan. I know it will. He wanted to believe her. She could see it in his face, the way he looked at the double walls and then back at her, trying to match his faith in his wife with his practical understanding of the world. The first cold night came in late September, earlier than expected. Katerina woke to frost on the windows and quickly stoked the fire. Beside her, Istvan stirred. Already? He muttered. Just a cold snap. Won't last. She fed wood into the stove, watching the flames catch and grow. Then she waited. An hour later, the sun was up and the cabin was warm. Not just surface warm, but deep warm. The kind that settled into your bones and stayed there. Katerina stood in the center of the room and slowly turned in a circle, feeling it. The heat's not running away, she said softly. Istvan, now fully awake, joined her. What do you mean? Put your hand on the inner wall, then go outside and put your hand on the outer wall. He did as she asked. When he came back in, his eyes were wider. The inner wall is warm. The outer wall is barely above freezing. The space between them is working. The heat's staying inside where we need it. The cold's staying outside where it belongs. They looked at each other, and for the first time since they'd started this project, Istvan's doubt cracked open into possibility. It might actually work, he said. It is working, Katerina corrected. But one cold morning wasn't winter. They both knew that. The real test was coming. The real Wyoming winter, with its relentless wind and temperatures that dropped so low that breath could freeze in your lungs. October brought more cold nights, and with each one, Katerina paid attention. How long did the warmth last after the fire died down? How quickly did the cabin lose heat compared to the previous year? Every detail mattered. Every observation was data. We're burning half as much wood, Istvan said one evening, reviewing their supplies. I thought I'd miscounted, but I checked 3 times. We've used half of what we used by this point last year. Katerina felt vindication warm in her chest, but she kept her voice level. The double wall is doing its job. The neighbors are burning through theirs at the same rate as always. I know. Don't you want to tell them? Show them what you've done. They have eyes, Katerina said. They can see our chimney produces less smoke than theirs. They can notice we're cutting less wood. If they want to understand why, they'll ask. But no one asked. Not yet. The mockery had turned to silence. But silence wasn't the same as acceptance. It was waiting to see if the strange, double-walled cabin would fail when the real cold arrived. November descended like a hammer. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in a single night. Wind roared across the plains, battering every structure, testing every wall, searching for weakness. Katerina woke to the sound of it, that howling, hunting sound she'd learned to recognize. She lay still for a moment, feeling the cabin around her. The wind was loud, yes, but she wasn't cold. Alona was still sleeping soundly. Istvan's breathing was deep and even. The stove had burned down to embers, yet the cabin held its warmth. Quietly, she rose and moved to the wall. She placed her palm flat against it. Warm, not hot, but warm, alive with trapped heat. She closed her eyes and smiled. Outside, she knew, the outer wall was taking the beating. The wind was pulling at it, trying to steal the warmth, but finding only cold wood and the empty space beyond. The real warmth, the precious warmth that kept her family alive, was sealed safely inside, protected by 18 inches of dead air and her own stubborn belief that she was right. Let them mock, she thought. Let them doubt. Winter would tell the truth. And winter was just beginning. The first visitor came on a Wednesday morning, 3 weeks into the deep cold. Katerina was outside splitting kindling when she saw Martha Henderson approaching. Wrapped in so many layers, she looked twice her normal size. The woman's face was red from cold, despite the scarves, and her breath came out in desperate gasps. "Katerina," Martha said, stopping at the property line. She seemed reluctant to come closer. "I need to ask you something." Katerina set down the axe. "Ask." "Your chimney, it's barely smoking. Has your fire gone out?" "No, it's burning steady." Martha's eyes narrowed with confusion. "That's impossible. We keep our fire roaring all day and night, and our cabin's still cold enough to see our breath in the mornings. How is yours?" She stopped herself, pride warring with desperation on her face. "The double wall," Katerina said simply. "That ridiculous second wall you built?" The words came out sharper than Martha probably intended. "You're telling me that's making a difference? Come inside and see for yourself." Martha hesitated, then followed Katerina to the door. The moment she stepped inside, her entire body reacted. Her shoulders dropped. Her face slackened. She pulled the scarf away from her mouth and just stood there, breathing. "It's warm," Martha whispered. "Actually warm. Not just less cold. Warm." The heat stays trapped between the two walls. The outer wall takes the wind. The inner wall holds steady. Katerina moved to the stove, checking the fire. "We burn half the wood we used to, and we stay twice as comfortable." Martha walked to the inner wall, pressing her hand against it like she didn't believe what her body was telling her. "How long have you known that this worked?" "Since the first cold snap. But I needed to be sure. Needed to see it through the worst of it." "The worst of it." Martha's voice went hollow. "Katerina, we're running out of wood. Jonas cut all summer, and we're already burning through our stores faster than we planned. If this winter runs long—" She stopped, wrapping her arms around herself. "I told him we should have cut more. He said we had plenty. Everyone said we had plenty." Everyone built their cabins the same way, planned their wood supplies the same way. Katerina poured hot water from the kettle, adding herbs for tea. Same thinking gets same results. "You're saying we were all wrong?" "I'm saying the old way worked fine in Virginia and Pennsylvania. But this isn't Virginia. This is Wyoming, and Wyoming needs different thinking." Martha took the offered tea with shaking hands. She held the cup close to her face, breathing in the steam. "The men laughed at you all summer. Jonas was one of them. He came home and told me about your double-wall folly. Said you were wasting time and resources on something that didn't make sense." "I know what they said." "And you just kept building anyway?" "What choice did I have? Be right and mocked, or be wrong and frozen?" Katerina sat down across from her. "I chose being right." Martha was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was smaller. "Can you show me how you did it? The spacing, the construction, all of it?" "I can." "Would you?" Katerina met her eyes. "After winter, when the ground thaws and building is possible again. I'll show anyone who wants to learn." Martha nodded slowly, then drained her tea in 3 quick swallows, as if trying to drink in the warmth itself. "I should go. Jonas will wonder where I am." "Tell him he's welcome to come see for himself." "He won't. Not yet. He's too proud." Martha stood, reluctantly wrapping herself back in her layers. "But he'll run out of wood before he runs out of winter. And when that happens, pride won't keep him warm." After Martha left, Istvan emerged from the back room where he'd been mending harnesses. "That's the first one," he said. "There'll be more." "You sound certain." "I am certain. Their wood won't last. Ours will. Simple mathematics." Katerina returned to the window, watching Martha trudge back through the snow. They're all doing the same calculation now, all realizing the same truth. The only question is, who'll swallow their pride first? But pride, Katerina was learning, was a stubborn thing. Days passed, the cold deepened. Katerina watched the smoke from neighboring chimneys grow thicker, darker, more desperate. She heard the sound of axes from before dawn until after dark, as men tried to chop enough wood to keep up with their burning. She saw the exhaustion in people's faces when they came to town for supplies. And she saw them notice her. Notice that she wasn't exhausted. That Istvan wasn't spending every waking moment chopping wood. That their daughter played outside without the desperate, pinched look of constant cold that other children wore. "People are staring," Alona said one afternoon as they walked through town. I know. Why? Is something wrong? No, sweetheart. Something's right. They're just not used to seeing what right looks like. The second visitor came at night. Katerina woke to knocking, soft, almost apologetic knocking that didn't match the urgency she sensed behind it. Istvan was already moving, pulling on his coat. "Who comes at this hour?" he muttered. Through the window, Katerina could see a figure hunched against the wind. Istvan opened the door to reveal Thomas Chen, their neighbor from a mile east, a quiet man who kept to himself. "I'm sorry," Thomas said immediately. "I know it's late. He stopped, teeth chattering so hard he could barely speak. "Come in," Katerina said, already moving to stoke the fire. Thomas stumbled inside, and Katerina saw immediately that something was very wrong. His lips were blue. His hands were shaking so violently he couldn't remove his own coat. Istvan had to help him. "My cabin," Thomas managed. "The north wall. Something cracked. Wind's coming straight through. Fire can't keep up. Wife and children are huddled in the corner with every blanket we own, and they're still freezing." "How long has it been like this?" Istvan asked. "Since this morning. I tried to patch it, but the wind just tears through whatever I put up. It's like the cabin's bleeding heat." Thomas looked at Katerina, desperation naked on his face. "Martha said your cabin stays warm. Said you built something different. I need to know how. My daughter's 6 years old. She's coughing. I can't—" His voice broke. Katerina's mind was already working. The crack opened because the wood dried wrong, contracted in the extreme cold. The wind found the weakness and widened it. You can't patch it from outside because the wind fights you. You need to seal it from inside and outside simultaneously. Create a dead space that stops the air movement. "I don't understand." You need a second wall. Not around the whole cabin, you don't have time for that, but around the damaged section. Double the wood, trap the air between, stop the bleeding. Thomas stared at her. "Tonight? In the dark? In this cold? Do you have another choice?" "No." "Then we work tonight." She was already moving, pulling on her own coat. "Istvan, bring the tools. Thomas, how much spare lumber do you have?" "Not much. Maybe enough for 20 feet of wall. If we use every scrap." "Then we use every scrap." Istvan touched her arm. "Katerina, it's dangerous out there. The temperature will kill his family if we don't help." She met his eyes. "This is why we built what we built. Not just for us. For this moment, when someone else needs what we learned." The work was brutal. The wind tried to tear the boards from their hands. The cold made every movement painful, every breath a burning struggle. But Katerina had done this before, knew the measurements, understood the spacing. Under her direction, they built an inner wall 18 inches from the damaged outer wall, sealed the gaps with whatever they could find, fabric, clay, even dried moss. By the time the sun rose, the bleeding had stopped. Thomas stood in his cabin, his family clustered around the stove that was finally, blessedly, winning its battle against the cold. His wife was crying, not from misery now, but from relief. "It's working," Thomas said, his voice thick with emotion. "The wind's not pulling anymore. The heat's staying." Katerina examined their work in the early light. Rough, hasty, not as perfect as her own construction, but functional. "It'll hold through the winter. Come spring, you can rebuild it properly. Extend it around the whole cabin if you want." "I want." Thomas looked at her with something approaching awe. "I want to build it exactly like yours. Will you teach me?" "Yes." Everyone was laughing at you. I heard them. I laughed too. His shame was visible. "I'm sorry." "Don't apologize to me. Just remember this feeling next time someone tries something different. Remember that different isn't always wrong. Word of that night spread faster than the cold. By the next evening, there were 4 men standing outside Katerina's cabin. By the end of the week, there were a dozen. Some came with questions. Some came with skepticism that warred with desperate hope. All of them came because their woodpiles were shrinking and their options were vanishing. Silas Mercer was among them. He stood at the back of the group, arms crossed, face carefully neutral. When the others finally left, he remained. "You're waiting to talk to me, alone," Katerina said. It wasn't a question. Didn't want to give you the satisfaction in front of others. He tried to make it sound like a joke, but it fell flat. "You were right. I was wrong. There, I said it." "I don't need you to say it." "I know. That's what makes it worse." He moved closer, studying the double walls and the fading light. "I've been building things for 20 years. Barns, cabins, fences, sheds. I thought I knew what worked. Thought experience meant something." Experience does mean something, but so does adaptation. What worked in Kentucky doesn't work in Wyoming. "You could have been nicer about it when I questioned you." Katerina turned to face him fully. "You stood in my yard and told me I was wasting my time. You laughed at me. You told other people I was foolish. And now you want me to apologize for not being nice enough when I was right and you were wrong?" Silas flinched. "That's fair. I don't need your admission that it's fair. I need you to think before you mock the next person who tries something new. I need you to consider that your 20 years of experience might not be the only way to solve a problem." "I will. I am." He paused. "My wood won't last. I've been rationing, trying to stretch it. But the mathematics don't lie. I'll run out in February at this rate." "What are you asking me?" "Can I build a second wall around my cabin? Is there time?" Katerina considered. "If you start now, if you work fast, if you're willing to live with rough construction that you'll refine later, yes. Barely." "Will you help?" "No." He looked stunned. "But you helped Thomas." "Thomas came in crisis, with his family freezing." "You're coming from pride, after spending months mocking what could have saved you." Katerina's voice was level, but firm. "I'll tell you how to do it. I'll answer your questions, but you'll do the work yourself. You'll earn this knowledge." Silas's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Fair enough." She spent the next 2 hours walking him through every detail: the spacing, the ceiling, the points where precision mattered and where speed was acceptable. He listened carefully, asked good questions, took mental notes. When he finally left, he turned back at the property line. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for sharing this even after I was an ass." "I'm not sharing it for you. I'm sharing it because Cole doesn't care about pride, and I won't let stubbornness kill people when knowledge can save them." That night, Istvan said, "You could have helped him." "I could have. But you didn't." He needs to understand what he mocked. He needs to feel every board, every nail, every moment of doubt that I felt when I was building this and everyone was laughing. Katerina stared into the fire. "People learn better when they earn knowledge with their own hands." "You sound like your grandfather." "Good. He was right about most things." December brought a cold snap that made November look gentle. Temperatures dropped so low that spit froze before it hit the ground. The wind stopped being something you fought against and became something you survived, if you were lucky. 3 families abandoned their cabins and crowded into homes with better wood supplies. 1 family packed up entirely and headed south, gambling that they could make it to Colorado before the mountain passes closed. But Katerina's cabin stood warm, Her woodpile, which by now should have been half gone, was barely touched. The double walls did more than trap heat. They transformed it, turned every piece of burned wood into twice the warmth, made every ember count double. People stopped hiding their interest. They came openly now, asking questions, taking measurements, planning their own construction for spring. Katerina answered every question honestly, drew diagrams in the snow with a stick, explained the principles until her voice went hoarse. "You could charge them," Istvan said one evening, "for the knowledge. Other people would." "Other people are welcome to, but I'm not building a fortune. I'm building a community that survives." "You're building your reputation, whether you want to or not." He was right. By Christmas, people were calling her the woman who beat the cold. When neighbors gathered for holiday dinners, her name came up constantly. Some spoke with admiration, some with envy. A few with lingering resentment that she'd been right when they'd been so certain she was wrong. But everyone spoke her name. Ilona noticed the change most. "People are nicer to us now," she said, watching Mrs. Henderson wave enthusiastically across the street. "They were always nice enough." "No, Mama, they weren't. They were polite, but they weren't nice. Now they're actually nice. They smile different, talk different." Out of the mouths of children, Katerina thought. Her daughter had seen what she'd been too focused to notice, the shift from tolerance to respect, from dismissal to attention. On New Year's Day, Silas Mercer came back. His second wall was finished. Rough, yes. Imperfect, certainly. But functional. "It works," he said simply. "My cabin's warm, my wood's lasting, my family's safe." He paused. "I owe you more than thanks." "You owe me nothing." "I owe you an apology in front of everyone who heard me mock you. And I'm going to give it." He looked at her steadily. "There's a meeting next week to plan for spring planting. Everyone will be there. I'm going to stand up and tell them all that I was wrong about you, wrong about your wall, and that you saved lives with your stubbornness." Katerina felt something tight in her chest loosen. "You don't have to." "I do. Because the next time someone has a new idea, I want people to remember this moment. I want them to remember that new doesn't mean wrong, and different doesn't mean foolish." He extended his hand. "Thank you, Katerina, for being right even when it was hard." She shook his hand. "Thank you for learning." After he left, she stood in her warm cabin, listening to her daughter play and her husband hum while he worked, and felt something she hadn't felt since they'd arrived in Wyoming. She felt like they belonged, not because people finally accepted her, but because she'd proven something to herself, that she could trust her own judgment even when the world said otherwise, that she could transform mockery into respect through nothing more than being right and refusing to quit. The double wall had saved their lives, but it had done something else too. It had shown her who she was when tested, and she liked what she found. The community meeting was held in the church, the only building large enough to hold everyone. Katerina arrived with Istvan and Ilona, not expecting anything beyond the usual discussion of spring planting schedules and land disputes. But the moment she walked through the door, she knew something had shifted. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Heads turned. Martha Henderson smiled and gestured to a seat she'd saved near the front. Thomas Chen nodded from across the room with unmistakable respect. Even people Katerina barely knew watched her with new attention. "They're treating you like someone important," Ilona whispered. "They're treating me like someone who solved a problem they couldn't," Katerina corrected quietly. "That's not the same thing." Silas Mercer stood at the front, waiting for the room to settle. When he spoke, his voice carried clearly. "Before we discuss spring planting, I need to say something that's been weighing on me." He paused, scanning the crowd. "Last summer, when Katerina Vara started building a second wall around her cabin, I laughed. Many of you heard me. Some of you laughed with me." The room went very quiet. "I called her foolish, said she was wasting resources, told anyone who'd listen that her double wall was unnecessary, complicated, and wouldn't work." He found Katerina in the crowd. "I was completely, absolutely wrong." Someone coughed. Someone else shifted in their seat. "Her double wall works. It works so well that it's the reason her family's wood lasted when ours didn't. It's the reason their cabin stayed warm while we froze. It's the reason—" his voice caught slightly. "It's the reason Thomas Chen's daughter survived that night his wall cracked. Because Katerina knew exactly how to fix it." Martha Henderson spoke up. "We all doubted her." "Yes, we did. And that's the point I'm trying to make." Silas straightened his shoulders. "The next time someone in this community tries something different, something we don't immediately understand, I hope we'll remember this moment. I hope we'll think before we mock, question before we dismiss. Because innovation doesn't always look familiar, and wisdom doesn't always speak with an accent we recognize." Katerina felt heat rise in her face, not from embarrassment, but from the sudden weight of public vindication. She hadn't asked for this, hadn't wanted it exactly, but hearing it, hearing someone publicly acknowledge not just that she'd been right, but that the community's dismissal had been wrong, struck something deep. "Katerina," Silas continued, "I apologize, publicly, as you deserve, and I thank you for sharing your knowledge, even after we treated you poorly. You're a better neighbor than we were." The room erupted in applause, tentative at first, then genuine. Katerina stood because it seemed wrong not to, nodded her acknowledgement, and sat back down as quickly as possible. But after the meeting ended, she couldn't escape. People crowded around her, asking questions, seeking advice, sharing their own plans for double wall construction come spring. She answered mechanically, her mind still processing what had just happened. Finally, a voice cut through the crowd. "Make room! Let the woman breathe!" The crowd parted to reveal Pastor Wilhelm, a man who rarely involved himself in practical matters, but commanded natural respect. He gestured toward his office. "Mrs. Vara, a moment?" In the small office, away from the crowd, Pastor Wilhelm sat heavily in his chair. That was quite something out there. "Silas didn't need to do that." "No, he needed to. For himself, if not for you." The pastor steepled his fingers. "Word is spreading beyond our valley. I've had letters from communities as far as Montana asking about this double wall technique. They want to know if it's real, if it works, if it can be replicated." Katerina frowned. "It's just basic principles. Anyone with carpentry skills can, but most people don't think of it. That's the point. You saw a problem everyone else accepted as inevitable, and you solved it." He leaned forward. "There's a man named Richard Holbrook asking to meet with you. He's a builder from Cheyenne, has contracts with the territorial government. He wants to discuss your design." "Discuss it how?" He wasn't specific. But men like Holbrook don't travel for casual conversation. After she left the church, Istvan said, "You're not interested in meeting this Holbrook person, are you?" "I don't know. Should I be?" "That depends on what he wants." "That's what worries me." Richard Holbrook arrived 4 days later in a wagon loaded with surveying equipment and rolled blueprints. He was younger than Katerina expected, maybe 35, with the polished confidence of someone who'd never doubted his place in the world. "Mrs. Vara," he said, removing his hat, "thank you for seeing me. I've come a long way to meet the woman who's revolutionizing frontier architecture." "I built a wall," Katerina said flatly. "I didn't revolutionize anything." You're too modest. What you've created is brilliant. Simple, effective, replicable. Exactly what the territory needs. He gestured toward her cabin. May I see it? The actual construction? She led him around the structure, explaining the spacing, the sealing methods, the principle of trapped air as insulation. He took notes constantly, asked sharp questions, understood the mechanics immediately. This could save hundreds of lives, he said finally. Maybe thousands. The territory is expanding. New settlers arrive every month, and they build the same inadequate cabins because that's all they know. If we could standardize your design, make it the default construction method— We? Katerina interrupted. The Territorial Building Commission. I have connections, contracts. I could get your design adopted as the recommended standard for all new frontier construction. It sounded good. It sounded like exactly what should happen. But something in his tone made Katerina hesitate. What would that cost me? Holbrook smiled. Nothing financially, but I would need to patent the design under my firm's name. For legal protection, you understand. To prevent unscrupulous builders from cutting corners or misrepresenting the technique. You want to patent my design under your name. It's standard practice. The original innovator provides the concept. The development firm handles implementation, standardization, legal protection. He spoke like this was obviously reasonable. You'd receive recognition, of course. Credit in all documentation. Your name attached to the method. My name attached, while your company owns it. Owns the patent, yes. But Mrs. Vara, think of the impact. Your idea, spreading across the entire territory, saving lives, changing how people build. Isn't that worth more than ownership? Katerina looked at him for a long moment. Get off my property. Excuse me? You heard me. Leave. Holbrook's smile vanished. Mrs. Vara, I'm offering you a chance to give you my work so you can profit from it while I receive credit and recognition? No, you're being unreasonable. The patent process requires capital, legal expertise, government connections, things you don't have. Then I'll live without them. She moved toward her door. I shared this knowledge freely because people were dying. I'll continue sharing it freely. Anyone who wants to learn can learn. Anyone who wants to build can build. But I won't hand it to someone who sees my survival solution as a business opportunity. You don't understand how the world works. I understand that you traveled 4 days to convince a woman to give you something valuable for nothing. I understand that your standardization would give you control over something you didn't create. I understand perfectly, Mr. Holbrook. Now leave. He left, angry, wheels churning through snow with unnecessary force. Istvan, who'd been listening from inside, came out. That was a lot of money you just turned down. He would have paid, eventually, once you'd negotiated. I don't want his money. What do you want? Katerina looked at her double walls, at the warm cabin that had kept her family alive. I want this to belong to everyone. No patents, no ownership, no one controlling who can use it or how. That's idealistic. Maybe, but it's right. Word of Holbrook's visit spread quickly, and with it came unexpected consequences. 3 days later, a different man arrived, Jonathan Webb, who introduced himself as a journalist from the Cheyenne Daily Leader. He had a notebook and sharp eyes that missed nothing. I'm writing a piece about innovation on the frontier, he said. Your double wall technique is exactly the kind of story my readers want. The woman who solved what men couldn't, refused to be silenced by mockery, and now won't sell out to wealthy interests. I'm not interested in being in your newspaper. Why not? You've done something remarkable. People should know. People who need to know already know. My neighbors learned. They'll teach others. Knowledge spreads without newspapers. Webb smiled. Mrs. Vara, knowledge spreads faster with newspapers. Right now, your technique is local. With a story, it becomes territorial, national even. Imagine every settlement from here to California learning what you've done. Katerina felt Istvan's hand on her shoulder. A warning or support, she wasn't sure which. What would this story say? She asked carefully. The truth. That you saw a problem, created a solution, faced mockery, proved yourself right, and refused to let anyone steal credit for your work. He flipped open his notebook. I'd need details. Your background, your motivation, the specifics of the construction. And if I give you these details, what happens? Your story gets told, accurately, respectfully. People learn from it. People learn from it, or people use it to sell newspapers? Webb didn't flinch. Both. That's how information spreads in the modern world. But would you rather the story be told accurately by me, or inaccurately by someone else? Because Holbrook's already telling his version in Cheyenne. Says you're a difficult woman who doesn't understand business opportunities, that your design is overrated, that his firm could improve it significantly. Katerina's hands clenched. He's lying. Probably. So correct him. Tell your version. Control your own narrative. I don't want to control any narrative. I want to be left alone. That option ended when you became interesting. Webb's voice wasn't unkind. You can't make yourself uninteresting again. The only choice now is whether you participate in how your story gets told. After he left, without getting his interview, Katerina sat at her table, head in her hands. He's right, Ilona said quietly. She'd been listening from the corner, doing arithmetic homework. If you don't tell your story, someone else will tell it wrong. Since when did you become wise about newspapers? Since I started listening when adults think I'm not. Ilona set down her slate. The kids at school talk about you, Mama. Some of them say nice things. Some say their parents think you're getting too proud, too big. Some say you're just lucky. Nobody actually knows you. I don't need them to know me. Maybe not, but maybe you need them to know the truth, so they stop making up lies. Out of the mouths of children, Katerina thought again. That evening, as they prepared dinner, there was another knock. Katerina almost didn't answer, exhausted from the day's visitors. But this time, it was Martha Henderson, and her face was troubled. Katerina, there's something you need to know. She came inside without waiting for invitation. There's talk in town. Some of the men are saying you're getting too much credit, that Istvan did most of the actual building, that you just had an idea but couldn't have executed it alone. Istvan's face darkened. That's not... I know it's not true. Anyone who watched knows it's not true. But they're saying it anyway. Martha twisted her hands together. They're also saying you're trying to profit from the design, that you wanted money from Holbrook, but asked for too much. I didn't ask for anything. I refused everything. I know. But lies travel faster than truth. And these lies are being told by men who don't like that a woman solved something they couldn't. She met Katerina's eyes. You need to set the record straight, publicly, before their version becomes the accepted version. After Martha left, Katerina stood at the window, watching snow fall in the darkness. They can't stand it, she said quietly, that I was right, that they were wrong. So now they're rewriting the story to make themselves feel better. Istvan moved beside her. What do you want to do? I want to pretend none of this matters. Does that work? No. She turned to face him. Ilona's right. Martha's right. Even that journalist is right. If I stay silent, They'll decide what the truth is, and their truth will be whatever makes them comfortable. So you'll talk to Webb? I'll talk to Webb. I'll tell him everything. The design, the mockery, the vindication, Holbrook's attempt to steal credit, all of it. She felt resolution hardening in her chest. And I'll make sure everyone understands this technique belongs to everyone. No patents, no ownership. Free knowledge for anyone who needs it. That'll make you more visible, not less. I know, but visibility isn't the worst thing. Erasure is worse. Having your work stolen is worse. Watching lies become history is worse. She slept fitfully that night, her mind churning through what she would say, how she would say it, what parts mattered most. But when she woke, there was a new problem. Thomas Chen was at her door before breakfast, his face grim. There's been an accident. Young Samuel Porter tried to build a double wall on his family's cabin. Did it wrong, didn't leave enough space, sealed it too tight. His father tried to explain the mistake, and Samuel got defensive, said he knew what he was doing because everyone was talking about it being so simple. What happened? The walls trapped moisture instead of air. The wood started rotting from the inside. The whole structure's compromised now. They'll have to tear it down and start over. And they don't have resources for that. Thomas's voice dropped. Samuel's blaming you. Says you made it sound easier than it is. Says you should have given clearer instructions. Katerina's stomach sank. This was what she'd feared. People taking the principle, but missing the precision. Thinking understanding meant mastery. I need to see it. He won't want to talk to you. He's embarrassed and angry. And those emotions are tangled together. I don't care what he wants. If my technique is being blamed, I need to see what actually went wrong. The Porter cabin was a disaster. The walls bulged oddly, dark stains spreading through the wood like disease. When Katerina pressed her hand against the outer wall, it gave slightly, soft, compromised, dying. Samuel Porter stood nearby, arms crossed, face red. He was maybe 20, young enough to still think confidence could substitute for knowledge. You see what your brilliant idea did? He said before Katerina could speak. I see what happened when someone attempted my idea without understanding it. She moved around the structure, assessing. You left no ventilation gaps. The air between the walls had nowhere to go, so moisture built up. That's not a flaw in the design. That's a flaw in execution. You didn't tell anyone about ventilation gaps. I told everyone who asked proper questions. Did you ask anyone? Or did you hear about the double wall secondhand and assume you understood it? Samuel's father, Marcus, stepped forward. Katerina, he's young, made a mistake. But now we're facing a full rebuild in the middle of winter, and we can't afford it. I know, and I'm sorry this happened. But I can't be responsible for every person who tries this without learning it properly. She studied the damaged walls. I'll help you fix it. But Samuel needs to understand why it failed before we start. I understand fine, Samuel muttered. No, you don't. If you did, you wouldn't have sealed the walls completely. You would have left ventilation at the top and bottom to allow air circulation. You would have checked moisture levels before final sealing. You would have tested pressure points. She turned to face him directly. You thought you understood because the concept sounds simple. But simple doesn't mean easy. And hearing about something isn't the same as learning it. Marcus looked at his son. She's right. She's making excuses. No, I'm explaining reality. Katerina's voice hardened. You built something without proper knowledge, and now want to blame me for your failure. That's not how responsibility works. The silence stretched taut. Finally, Marcus said, What would it take to fix this? 3 days of work if we start now. Remove the outer wall, let the inner structure dry, rebuild with proper ventilation. I'll supervise, but Samuel does the work. Every board, every nail, every seal. He learns by doing, properly this time. Samuel started to protest, but his father cut him off. He'll do it, and he'll thank you for the education. As Katerina walked away later, Istvan said, "That was harsh. That was necessary. If word spreads that the double wall fails, people will stop using it. They need to understand it's not the technique that failed, it's incomplete knowledge." She pulled her coat tighter. "That's why I need to talk to Webb. Not for recognition, for accuracy, so people learn the right way, not the dangerous way. You're becoming a teacher, whether you want to or not." "I know." She looked back at the Porter cabin. "And if I'm going to teach, I better make sure I teach well. Because next time, it might not just be wood that rots. It might be people who die." That night, she wrote out detailed instructions, every measurement, every principle, every warning she could think of. By lantern light, her hand cramping from the unfamiliar work of extensive writing, she documented everything she'd learned. When Webb came back 3 days later, she was ready. "I'll give you your story," she told him, "all of it. But you'll also print these instructions, word for word, so anyone who reads about the double wall can build it safely." Webb took the pages, scanning them quickly. "This is very specific, very thorough." "That's the point. Knowledge without precision is dangerous. I learned that this week." "Is that part of the story too? The failed attempt?" Katerina hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, all of it. The success, the mockery, the vindication, and the reminder that good ideas still require good execution. Tell it complete, or don't tell it at all." Webb smiled, genuine this time, not the journalist's practiced expression. "Now that's a story worth telling. The woman who refuses to let her innovation become either myth or disaster." As he left, Istvan said, "You just made yourself more famous, not less." "I know, but maybe fame with accuracy is better than obscurity with lies." "You're changing," Alona observed. "You used to want to be left alone." Katerina pulled her daughter close. "I still do, but sometimes what we want and what we need to do aren't the same thing. I need to do this, to protect the work, to spread real knowledge, to make sure what I learned helps people instead of hurting them." "That sounds lonely." "Maybe, but it sounds right." And right, Katerina was learning, mattered more than comfortable. The article appeared in the Cheyenne Daily Leader on a Tuesday morning in late January. By Friday, Katerina's life had transformed into something she no longer recognized. The first letter arrived Thursday, then 5 more. By Saturday, there were 23 pieces of correspondence stacked on her table. From Montana, Colorado, even one from as far as Oregon Territory. All asking the same questions. All wanting the same knowledge. "People are copying out your instructions by hand," Istvan said, reading one letter. "This woman in Helena says she made 4 copies to distribute to her neighbors." "That's what I wanted." "Is it? Because there are 12 more families planning to visit, in person, to see the cabin themselves." Katerina looked up from the letter she was reading. "What?" "They don't trust paper instructions. They want to see it with their own eyes, ask questions face to face." He set down the letter. "We're about to become very popular." He wasn't wrong. The visitors started arriving within 2 weeks. Some came alone. Most came in small groups, husbands and wives, sometimes entire families. They walked around her cabin, touched the walls, asked 1,000 variations of the same questions. Katerina answered each one, demonstrated the spacing, explained the ventilation principles, drew diagrams in the snow over and over until her hands were numb and her voice was raw. "You're exhausted," Martha said one evening, bringing over soup. "You barely sleep anymore." "People need to learn properly. I can't let what happened with Samuel happen again." "You also can't teach the entire territory personally." "Then what should I do? Turn them away? Let them build it wrong and blame me when it fails?" Martha had no answer for that. The tension built in other ways, too. One morning, Katerina walked into the general store to find conversation stop abruptly. Women she'd known for months suddenly found their shopping lists fascinating. Finally, Clara Simmons spoke. "Must be nice, being famous." "I'm not famous. I just solved a problem." "A problem you made sure everyone knew you solved. That article was quite detailed about how brilliant you are." Katerina felt heat rise in her face. "I didn't write the article. I just answered questions. And made sure your name was mentioned a dozen times while the rest of us, who've been surviving out here just as long, got nothing." Clara's voice carried an edge Katerina had never heard before. "Some of us have good ideas too, but we don't run to newspapers about them." "I didn't run to anyone. The journalist came to me." "And you cooperated, eagerly from what I hear." Katerina purchased her supplies in silence and left. Outside, Alona was waiting by the wagon. "Mrs. Simmons was mean to you. I could hear her from out here." "She's angry." "Why? You helped everyone." "I helped them survive winter, but I also made them feel small for not thinking of it themselves." Katerina climbed onto the wagon seat. "That's a complicated thing to forgive." The real complication arrived on a Wednesday afternoon in February. A military wagon rolled up to her cabin, and Captain James Mitchell stepped down, tall, official, carrying papers that rustled importantly in the wind. "Mrs. Vara, Captain Mitchell, Fort Russell. I'm here on behalf of the Territorial Quartermaster's office." Katerina's stomach tightened. Official visits never meant anything good. "What can I do for you, Captain?" "It's more what we can do for each other. The Army's expanding its presence in Wyoming. We're building new barracks, officer housing, storage facilities. Your double wall technique could save the government thousands in heating costs alone." He unrolled blueprints on her table, uninvited. "We're prepared to offer you a contract, $30 per structure to supervise construction. We're planning 42 buildings over the next year." Katerina did the mathematics automatically. Over $1,200. More money than she'd seen in her entire life. "That's a generous offer," Istvan said carefully. "It's fair compensation for valuable expertise. Mrs. Vara would need to travel, of course. Fort Russell, Fort Laramie, potentially locations in Montana and Dakota territories. 3 to 6 months away from home, though we'd ensure proper accommodation and travel expenses." 3 to 6 months, Katerina repeated. "The structures need supervision during critical phases. We can't risk improper construction. You'd need to be present for initial framing, wall installation, and final sealing of each building." Mitchell smiled. "It's an extraordinary opportunity. Government work provides stability, reputation, future contracts. And takes me away from my family for half the year." "Sacrifices are required for success, Mrs. Vara. Surely you understand that. You sacrificed your summer to build this cabin's walls. Now that sacrifice has positioned you for significant opportunity." After he left, saying he'd return in 3 days for her answer, Katerina sat very still. Istvan spoke first. "That's life-changing money." "I know. We could expand the farm, buy proper equipment, save for Alona's future." "I know. But Alona's 9 years old, and I'd miss half her childhood chasing government contracts." Katerina pressed her hands flat against the table. "Is that what this was for? To turn survival into profit?" "There's nothing wrong with profit. There is when it costs everything else. Alona, listening from the corner as she always did, said quietly, "Are you leaving?" The question cut through Katerina like a blade. "I don't know yet." "But you're thinking about it." "I'm thinking about what's best for us. For you. What's best for me is you being here." Alona's voice was small but firm. "Money doesn't keep me warm at night when I have nightmares. Money doesn't teach me things. You do." Katerina felt tears press behind her eyes. "You're right." "Then why is this hard?" "Because turning down $1,200 feels like turning down our future security." "Or," Istvan said slowly, "it's choosing a different kind of security, the kind that doesn't require you to be someone you're not." The 3 days until Mitchell's return were the longest of Katerina's winter. Visitors kept arriving, their questions endless. The letters kept coming, their needs relentless. And underneath it all, the weight of that impossible choice pressed down on everything. On the second day, Silas Mercer came by. "Heard about the Army contract. Congratulations." "I haven't accepted it." His eyebrows rose. "You're considering refusing $1,200? I'm considering what that money would actually cost. It would cost you time, but it would give you everything else. Would it? Or would it turn me into something I don't want to be? Someone who travels endlessly, supervising strangers, missing my daughter's life for government paychecks." Katerina pulled her shawl tighter. "I built this wall to save my family. Now everyone wants me to leave my family to teach them how to save theirs." "That's the price of being good at something. Everyone wants a piece of you." "Then maybe I shouldn't have shared what I knew." "You don't mean that." She was quiet for a long moment. "No, I don't. But I'm tired, Silas. Tired of being asked for more than I have to give. Tired of every solution creating new problems." "Welcome to leadership. It's exhausting." "I never wanted to lead anything. I just wanted to survive winter." "Too late for that. You survived winter so well that now everyone wants you to teach them how. That's not a burden you can put down just because it's heavy." After he left, Katerina found Istvan repairing the fence line. "I'm going to turn down the contract," she said. He didn't look surprised. "You're sure?" "I'm sure. Whatever we need, we'll figure out another way. But I won't trade my presence for profit. I won't become the kind of person who values money over being there." "The captain won't be happy." "The captain can find someone else." But when Mitchell returned, he didn't accept her refusal gracefully. "You're making a mistake," he said, standing rigidly in her doorway. "This opportunity won't come again." "Then I'll live without it." "Do you understand what you're turning down? The prestige, the security, the chance to shape military construction across multiple territories?" "I understand perfectly. I'm turning down 6 months away from my family. That's all that matters." Mitchell's jaw tightened. The Army remembers people who refuse its contracts. When future opportunities arise, then I'll refuse those too. "Captain Mitchell, I'm grateful for the offer, but my answer is no. Firmly, finally, no." After he left, his wagon wheels churning up frozen mud in a way that seemed deliberately aggressive, Alona hugged Katerina fiercely. "You stayed." "Of course I stayed. But it was a lot of money." "Not enough to be worth leaving you." Katerina held her daughter close. "Never enough for that." That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. Word of her refusal spread faster than the original article. Within days, Katerina noticed a shift in how people treated her. Some seemed relieved. She'd proven she wasn't motivated purely by profit. But others, like Clara Simmons, grew colder. $1,200, Clara said loudly at the next community meeting. She turned down $1,200. Must be nice to be wealthy enough that money doesn't matter. We're not wealthy, Katerina said evenly. Then you're foolish. My husband would take that contract in a heartbeat. Any sensible person would. Then perhaps you should tell your husband to develop an innovation the Army wants to pay for. The words came out harder than Katerina intended, and the room went silent. Clara's face flushed red. You think you're better than us. That's what this is really about. You stumbled onto one good idea, and now you act like you're some kind of frontier genius who's above normal concerns like feeding her family. That's not... We were doing fine before you arrived, surviving just like everyone else. Then you build your fancy double wall, get your newspaper article, refuse military money like it's beneath you, and somehow we're all supposed to be grateful? Clara stood up. You didn't save anyone. You just made the rest of us feel inadequate. The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Pastor Wilhelm cleared his throat. Clara, that's unfair. Is it? Ask anyone here if they feel better or worse about themselves since Katerina became famous for being smarter than the rest of us. To Katerina's shock, several people wouldn't meet her eyes. Martha Henderson finally spoke. Clara's wrong about most of it, but she's not entirely wrong about how it feels. Katerina, you helped us, truly, but you also showed us our own failures. That's hard to live with. I never meant to make anyone feel inadequate. Intention doesn't change impact, Martha said gently. We're glad we're warmer. We're grateful we learned. But gratitude and resentment can exist at the same time. Katerina left the meeting early, her mind spinning. At home, Istvan said, You can't win. Save them, they resent you. Refuse the army contract, they call you foolish. What exactly are you supposed to do? I don't know. Maybe you stop trying to please everyone. Accept that some people will be angry no matter what you choose. That's lonely. Yes, but it's honest. The next crisis came from an unexpected direction. Thomas Chen appeared at dawn, his face gray with exhaustion. Katerina, I need help. It's not the wall this time. It's worse. What happened? My son, he's sick, high fever, struggling to breathe. The doctor in town says it's pneumonia, says he needs to stay warm and dry above all else. Thomas's voice cracked. Our cabin's warm, thanks to you. But the medicine, the doctor wants $30 for the treatment course. I don't have it. I spent everything on supplies and building materials. Katerina's mind worked quickly. She had saved some money, but $30 was nearly all of it. Without that reserve, one bad season could destroy them. But Thomas's son was 6 years old. I'll get the money. Katerina, I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm giving. Go back to your son. I'll bring the medicine by tonight. After Thomas left, Istvan said carefully, That's most of our savings. I know. We'll be vulnerable. I know that too. Why are you doing this? Katerina met his eyes. Because Thomas helped build this community's respect for me. Because his family was one of the first to believe the double wall worked. Because his son is 6 years old and doesn't deserve to die when I have the means to prevent it. That's not sustainable. You can't save everyone. Maybe not. But I can save this one child today, and that's enough. She delivered the medicine that evening. Thomas tried to refuse it, tried to insist he'd pay her back, but Katerina wouldn't hear it. Just get your son well. That's payment enough. But news of her gift spread, and with it came new expectations. 2 days later, another family came asking for help with medical bills. Then someone needed money for seeds. Then another wanted a loan for tools. You have to stop, Istvan said after the fourth request. We can't fund everyone's problems. I know, but how do I decide? Who deserves help and who doesn't? That's not your decision to make. It's not your responsibility to save everyone. Then whose responsibility is it? Their own. The words were harsh but true, and they settled between them like cold stone. Katerina started saying no. It felt like tearing something in her chest each time, but she had to. They couldn't survive if she gave away everything they had. But saying no had its own cost. "Guess she's not as generous as people thought," someone muttered at the general store. "Probably saving her money for something better than helping neighbors. Easy to be charitable once, when everyone's watching. Harder to keep it up." The whispers followed her everywhere. One night, Ilona asked, "Why are people so mean now? You helped them." "Because I also said no. And people remember the no more than the yes."
Oh, that's not fair.
No, but it's human. The breaking point came in early March. Katerina was in town when she saw a small crowd gathered outside the church. At the center stood a man she didn't recognize, holding up a wooden frame with 2 walls attached. "This," he was saying loudly, "is the Vara double wall system. Simple, effective, and now available for construction through my firm. $20 per cabin, complete installation, guaranteed results." Katerina pushed through the crowd. "What are you doing?" The man turned, smiling. "Mrs. Vara, perfect timing. I'm Gregory Walsh, builder out of Laramie. I'm offering to install your design for families who don't have the time or skill to build it themselves." "You're charging them for my freely given knowledge?" "I'm charging them for my labor and expertise. The knowledge may be free, but the application isn't." His smile never wavered. "Surely you understand basic economics." "I understand profiteering.
I'm providing a service. If people want your design but lack the ability to build it, why shouldn't someone offer to help them, for fair compensation?" "Because I gave this knowledge freely, specifically so people wouldn't be exploited." "And they're not being exploited. They're being offered a choice. Build it themselves with your free instructions, or pay me to do it for them. That's called freedom of commerce, Mrs. Vara." Several people in the crowd were nodding. Walsh was right in one sense. He wasn't technically stealing anything. But it felt wrong, felt like a violation of everything she'd intended. "You're twisting what I meant to share. I'm making it accessible to people who need it, but can't achieve it alone. If anything, I'm extending your good work." Walsh addressed the crowd. "Any interested families, come see me at the hotel. I have openings for 3 projects starting next week." Katerina walked away, hands shaking with frustrated rage. At home, she collapsed into a chair. "I can't control it. Once I shared the knowledge, it stopped being mine. Anyone can do anything with it, profit from it, modify it, use it however they want."
"That's what you said you wanted," Istvan reminded her. "Free knowledge for everyone. This is what that looks like."
"I wanted people to help each other, not for someone to turn it into a business."
"Can you stop him?"
"No, the knowledge is free. I can't control how people use it."
"Then you have to accept this. Walsh isn't the last person who will profit from what you shared. There will be others, maybe worse ones." Katerina closed her eyes. Every choice she'd made had seemed right at the time, but each one had created new complications, new conflicts, new ways for people to twist her intentions into something she never meant. "I'm tired," she said quietly. "So tired." Ilona climbed into her lap. Too big for it, really, but doing it anyway.
"You did the right thing, Mama."
"Even if it's hard now."
"How do you know?"
"Because we're warm, and Mr. Chen's son is getting better, and Mrs. Henderson's family isn't burning through all their wood. The good things are real. The hard things are just also real." Out of the mouths of children.
Katerina held her daughter close and decided something important. She couldn't control what others did with her knowledge, couldn't stop Walsh or anyone else from profiting, couldn't prevent people from resenting her or expecting too much or remembering her no's instead of her yeses. All she could control was herself, her choices, her family, her integrity. And that would have to be enough, even if it was lonely, even if it was hard, even if the cost of being right never stopped collecting its fee. Spring arrived reluctantly, bringing mud and the slow retreat of snow, but not yet warmth. Katerina stood in her doorway on the first day of April, watching families begin construction projects around the valley. At least 7 cabins now had the skeletal beginnings of second walls rising around them. Not Walsh's work, their own. "They're building it themselves," Istvan observed, joining her, "even after Walsh offered to do it for money. Some chose Walsh, most chose their own hands." Katerina felt something loosen in her chest. Maybe they understood after all. Or maybe they just can't afford $20. Does the reason matter if the result is the same? Before Istvan could answer, Pastor Wilhelm appeared on the road, walking with more urgency than his usual measured pace. "Katerina, thank God you're here. We have a situation." "What kind of situation?" "The Jenkins family, new settlers, arrived 2 weeks ago. They heard about your double wall technique, tried to build it themselves, but—" He paused, catching his breath. "They built it wrong. Sealed it completely with no ventilation, just like that Porter boy. But it's worse this time, much worse." The trapped moisture created mold. The whole family sick, coughing, fever, breathing problems. Doctor says they need to leave the cabin immediately, but they have nowhere to go and no money to rebuild. Katerina's stomach dropped. This was her nightmare, her solution becoming someone's disaster, her name attached to suffering instead of survival. "Show me." The Jenkins cabin was a horror. Black mold spread across the inner walls like a disease, the smell thick and choking. Inside, a woman sat on the floor with 3 small children clustered around her, all of them coughing with wet, rattling sounds that made Katerina's chest ache in sympathy. "Mrs. Jenkins, I'm Katerina Vara." The woman looked up with red-rimmed eyes. "The one who invented this death trap. The one who invented proper double-wall construction. This isn't what I designed. We followed the instructions from that newspaper article, word for word." Katerina moved closer, studying the walls. "The article included ventilation specifications. Did you implement those?" "My husband said they weren't necessary. Said the whole point was trapping air, so why would we put holes in it?" Mrs. Jenkins coughed violently. "He's at the doctor now. The cough's worst for him. Doctor says if we stay here another week, we might all end up with pneumonia, or worse." "Where's the newspaper? The one with the instructions?" Mrs. Jenkins pointed to a table. Katerina picked up the paper, scanning quickly. The instructions were there, complete, detailed, including 3 separate mentions of ventilation requirements. "Your husband didn't follow these. He modified them based on his own assumptions." "So this is our fault? We're stupid immigrants who can't read English properly?" "That's not what I said." "But it's what you meant. Everyone warned us Wyoming was hard. No one mentioned it was full of people who'd let us die, rather than admit their brilliant inventions might have flaws." The accusation stung, because it was exactly what Katerina feared people would say. That her design was dangerous. That sharing it had been reckless. That she'd prioritized her own vindication over others' safety. "I'll fix this," Katerina said quietly. "How? We have no money, no materials, nowhere to go." "You'll stay with us, my family, until we rebuild this properly." Mrs. Jenkins stared at her. "Why would you do that?" "Because your husband made a mistake based on incomplete understanding, and I won't let your children pay for it with their health." Katerina turned to Pastor Wilhelm. "Can you organize a work crew? We need this cabin torn down to the frame, the molded wood removed and burned, and proper reconstruction started within 3 days." "Katerina, that's a massive undertaking. It'll require—" "Everything, I know. Get Silas, Thomas, anyone who's successfully built a double wall. We do this right, and we do it publicly, so everyone sees what proper construction looks like, versus what happens when people modify the design without understanding it." The work began the next morning. Katerina directed the demolition herself, pointing out every place where the Jenkins modifications had created problems. As neighbors gathered to watch, she explained each mistake loudly and clearly. Here, no ventilation gap at the base. Air had nowhere to circulate. Here, they used green wood that released moisture as it dried. Here, they sealed everything before checking for dampness. Each mistake alone might have been survivable. Combined, they created a toxic environment. Silas Mercer, working beside her, said quietly, "You're being very public about this." "I have to be. If people think the double wall itself is dangerous, they'll stop building it. They need to understand it's modification without knowledge that's dangerous." "Some will say you're blaming the victims. Some will say that no matter what I do." Katerina pulled another piece of molded wood free. "But the Jenkins children deserve to live in a safe home, and other families deserve to know how to build one correctly. That's more important than protecting anyone's feelings, including mine." By the third day, Clara Simmons came to watch. She stood at the property line for an hour before finally approaching. "You're doing this for free," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yes. After turning down $1,200 from the Army. After saying you couldn't afford to help everyone." Clara's voice held something between accusation and confusion. "I don't understand you. The Jenkins made an honest mistake and are paying a terrible price. That's different from people asking me to fund their general expenses." Katerina didn't stop working as she spoke. "I can't save everyone from everything, but I can save specific people from specific disasters, especially when those disasters relate to something I created. You didn't create their mold problem, they did. I created the design they modified. That makes me responsible for ensuring people understand how to use it safely." Clara was quiet for a moment. "I was wrong about you. At the meeting, what I said." "Were you? Or were you right about how it feels, even if wrong about my intentions?" "Both, maybe." Clara picked up a hammer. "Can I help?" By the end of the week, the Jenkins cabin was rebuilt, properly this time, with perfect ventilation and proper materials. The family moved back in, and Mrs. Jenkins pulled Katerina aside. "Thank you. I know I was harsh that first day." "You were terrified for your children. I would have been harsh too." "Still, you didn't have to do this, especially not after I blamed you." Mrs. Jenkins glanced at her husband, who was testing the wall temperature with obvious relief on his face. "We'll tell everyone what you did. Make sure they know you fixed our mistake. Tell them how to build it correctly. That's more important than defending me." But the defense came anyway, in ways Katerina hadn't expected. At the next community meeting, Thomas Chen stood up. "I want to address something. There's been talk about Katerina Vara, some good, some bad. I want to make something clear. My son would be dead without her. Not because of her double wall, though that kept us warm, but because when I needed money for medicine, she gave me everything she had saved. No hesitation, no expectation of repayment." Martha Henderson stood next. "She spent a week rebuilding the Jenkins cabin for free, using her own time and expertise after they built it wrong. She didn't have to do that. She did it anyway. One by one, people Katerina had helped spoke up.
Not everyone. Clara Simmons stayed silent, and several others clearly still harbored resentment. But enough spoke that the room's temperature shifted noticeably. When they were done, Pastor Wilhelm said, "Mrs. Vara, would you like to respond?" Katerina stood slowly.
I don't need defense or praise. I did what needed doing because I could do it and because it was right. But I also need to say something difficult.
She paused, gathering her thoughts.
I can't be everything to everyone. I can't fund every expense, fix every problem, or teach every person individually. I'm one woman with limited resources and limited time. I've tried to share what I know freely, but I can't control how people use that knowledge or whether they choose to understand it fully before acting.
She looked around the room, meeting eyes.
Some of you resent me for succeeding where you struggled. Some resent me for refusing opportunities you think I should have taken. Some resent me simply for being different.
I can't change those feelings. All I can do is keep being who I am. Someone who solves problems when she can, says no when she must, and refuses to apologize for either. The silence that followed felt different from previous silences. Not comfortable exactly, but honest. Clara Simmons finally spoke.
That's fair, and harder than I gave you credit for.
The real test came 2 weeks later. Gregory Walsh returned, this time with contracts and a proposal for the Territorial Building Commission, a standardized Walsh double-wall system that he claimed to have refined and improved based on frontier innovations. He presented it at a special meeting, complete with drawings and specifications that were unmistakably Katerina's design with minor cosmetic changes. "This system," Walsh said smoothly, "represents the best of frontier ingenuity combined with professional engineering standards. I'm proposing it as the territorial standard for all new construction in cold regions."
That's Katerina's design, Silas said loudly.
"It's based on concepts that have been discussed widely. No one person can claim ownership of basic architectural principles." Walsh smiled. "Mrs. Vara herself said the knowledge belongs to everyone. I'm simply organizing that knowledge into a professional framework." Katerina felt Istvan tense beside her, but she placed a hand on his arm.
Let him finish.
Walsh continued his presentation, talking about profit margins, construction timelines, and government contracts. When he finished, he looked directly at Katerina. "Mrs. Vara, I'm prepared to offer you a position as a consulting expert. $5 per structure, credited in all documentation."
No.
"You're refusing? Again?"
"I'm refusing to legitimize your theft with my participation."
Katerina stood, moving to the front of the room.
"You're not wrong that knowledge belongs to everyone once it's shared. I can't stop you from using my design, and I won't try.
But I also won't pretend this Walsh system is anything other than my work with your name attached. Then you'll have no standing when the Territorial Commission adopts it. No recognition, no profit, no say in how it's implemented. I'll have something better. I'll have integrity." She turned to address the room. "Mr. Walsh wants government contracts and territorial adoption. I want families to survive winter. Those are different goals, and they require different approaches. His approach involves ownership, control, and profit. Mine involves free knowledge, individual choice, and community responsibility." "Pretty words," Walsh said, "but they won't put food on your table or secure your future. They'll let me sleep at night. That's worth more." The vote on Walsh's proposal happened a week later at the territorial capital. Katerina didn't attend. She had crops to plant and a family to tend. But Silas went, and he brought back news. They rejected it.
Katerina looked up from the garden rows she was marking. They what?
Rejected Walsh's proposal. said it relied too heavily on one person's expertise, his, without adequate evidence that modifications would work across different climates and conditions. Silas grinned. Someone on the commission had read that newspaper article, knew the original design was yours, asked why they should adopt a modified version from someone with no track record when they could recommend the proven original method directly, attributing it to you, with no patent restrictions or required consultants. So what did they do? Published your instructions as a territorial recommendation, free to anyone who wants them. No ownership, no control, exactly as you wanted. He handed her an official-looking document. You're in the territorial records now. The Vara method of double-wall construction for cold climate survival. They even included your warning about proper ventilation and moisture control. Katerina stared at the document, her name printed in official government type. Not as a contractor, not as someone who'd sold her expertise, but as someone who'd contributed knowledge freely for the public good. Walsh must be furious. Walsh is nothing. He can still offer his services, but now people know they don't need him. They can build it themselves using your freely available specifications. Silas grew serious. You won it, Katerina. Not money, not control, but something better. Your knowledge, preserved accurately, available to anyone who needs it. Forever. That evening, Katerina walked the perimeter of her cabin, touching the double walls that had started everything. They were weathered now, showing the marks of a hard winter survived and spring arrived. But they were solid, still working, still saving lives by doing exactly what she'd designed them to do. Ilona found her there. "Mama, why are you crying?" "I'm not crying, I'm just—" She pulled her daughter close. "I'm just realizing something important." "What?" "That I did it. The thing I set out to do. I saved us. And then I saved others. And now the knowledge exists where it can keep saving people long after I'm gone." She wiped her eyes. "That's worth all the mockery, all the complications, all the hard choices." Was it worth turning down the army money? Katerina looked at their modest cabin, their small garden, their simple life. Yes, because if I'd taken that money, I'd have spent months away from you, teaching strangers, missing your childhood. This way I'm here, present, teaching you that some things matter more than money. Like what? Like family, like integrity, like making choices you can live with even when they're difficult. She turned Ilona to face the double walls. "See this? This is more than wood and airspace. This is proof that being right matters, that persistence pays off, that you don't need permission or approval or wealth to change things. You just need to see clearly, work hard, and refuse to quit even when people laugh. And share what you know? Yes, always share what you know, because knowledge is the only thing that grows when you give it away." The spring passed into summer. More families built double walls. Some did it perfectly. Some made mistakes and learned. Gregory Walsh eventually left the territory, chasing other opportunities. The Jenkins family became friends, grateful in ways that transcended words. And slowly, so slowly Katerina almost didn't notice, the community's relationship with her shifted into something sustainable. Not worship, not resentment, but respect tempered with reality. They knew she wasn't perfect, wasn't unlimited, couldn't save everyone. But they also knew she'd try when it mattered, teach when she could, and stand firm in her principles, even when it cost her. One evening in late July, Katerina sat outside with Istvan, watching fireflies dance in the warm air. "Do you regret any of it?" he asked. "The publicity, the complications, the choices?" She thought about the long, difficult path from that first mocked wall
to this moment. About the mockery that became respect, the free knowledge that became territorial policy, the fame she never wanted that somehow became a platform for ensuring survival knowledge lived beyond her. I regret the parts where I thought I could control outcomes, where I believed sharing knowledge meant controlling how people used it. She leaned against his shoulder. But I don't regret the sharing itself, or standing firm when others wanted to profit from it, or choosing you and Alona over government money. What would you tell yourself if you could go back to that first cold morning when you decided to build the second wall? I tell myself that being right is harder than being wrong, but it's worth it. That mockery is temporary, but impact is permanent. That you can't control whether people accept your ideas, but you can control whether you compromise them for acceptance. She watched the fireflies, their brief lights like small truths glowing in darkness. And I tell myself that sometimes the most radical thing you can do is simply refuse to quit, refuse to sell out, and refuse to apologize for knowing something others don't. Not yet, anyway. Istvan kissed the top of her head. You changed things. This whole valley, maybe the whole territory, because you trusted yourself enough to build something different. I changed things because I had no choice. We would have frozen otherwise. That's what makes it perfect. You didn't do it for glory or recognition. You did it for survival. Everything else just followed. Inside, Ilona was already asleep, safe and warm in the cabin that had proven its worth through one brutal winter and would stand through many more. Tomorrow, Katerina would teach another family the proper spacing for double walls. Next week, she'd help troubleshoot a ventilation problem someone was having. Next month, there would be new challenges, new complications, new reasons why her simple solution to a simple problem would create unexpected consequences. But tonight, sitting in the warm summer air, Katerina allowed herself to feel something she'd been too busy to feel before. Satisfaction. Deep, complete satisfaction that she'd done what needed doing, remained who she needed to be, and created something that would outlast her own life. The double wall had saved her family from freezing, but it had done something else too, something she was only now understanding. It had shown her that individual persistence could become community transformation, that being mocked didn't mean being wrong, that you could give knowledge away freely and somehow become richer for it. That integrity, maintained through difficulty, was its own reward. She thought of all the families sleeping warm tonight because of what she'd shared, of the children who'd survive future winters because territorial policy now recommended proper insulation, of the slow spread of knowledge from person to person, cabin to cabin, valley to valley, carried by people who'd never know her name, but would benefit from her stubborn refusal to accept that freezing was inevitable. That was legacy. Not fame, not money, not government contracts. Legacy was warmth spreading outward, knowledge becoming survival, one woman's solution becoming everyone's possibility. And it was enough. More than enough. It was everything that mattered. The fireflies continued their dance, temporary lights in permanent darkness, each one brief, but collectively illuminating the night. Katerina watched them and understood. Individual impact might be small and short-lived, but when you refused to dim your own light, when you kept glowing despite mockery, doubt, and difficulty, you made it possible for others to see by, to find their way, to survive the darkness themselves. That was the real story. Not that she'd built something clever, but that she'd built it despite everything, shared it freely despite cost, and maintained her integrity despite temptation. The walls were just wood and air. The real construction was character. Hers, tested and proven true. and that would outlast any winter.